Compliance is a profession where people work tirelessly to make the world a better place. And there are hundreds of amazing and inspiring women who have helped the field develop into what it is today. Great Women in Compliance is part of the Compliance Podcast Network, so join Mary, Shirley, and Lisa Fine as they talk with women in compliance who are making a difference.
You're listening to the Great Women in Compliance podcast. This is the last podcast of the year, and as you all know, it's been quite a year, both professionally and personally, for the GWIC team. When I started thinking about this episode, I wanted something particularly meaningful and decided that it was a time to interview the first GWIC that I met and my first compliance friend. So with that in mind, I'm Lisa Fine, and today I'm interviewing Mary Shirley, who is my co-host on the Great Women in Compliance podcast. You all know Mary through her podcast, her writing, her presence in the E&C community, and just being a wonderful person. But we generally hear her views through her interviews with other people. So here is a chance to hear from her as a guest. So with that, Mary, thank you for being here with me in this type of unusual episode. And thank you for everything you've done this year for me and for the GWIC community.
Thank you, Lisa. I actually had tingles when you were doing that introduction there. It was so very kind and generous of you. And I'm so grateful to have you as a friend and a colleague, especially as we've gone through a particularly hard year. Thank you for all that you've done for me and for the compliance community.
And just so you all know, this and one other part of this interview, which she did not know about. So that was a complete surprise to Mary as well. And with that, we're going to start in the substance. So Mary, we've talked about your background as a global traveler before, but you've just started a new role at Fresenius. You're the head of culture and integrity and compliance education. Can you talk about your new role, what it entails, how it happened, what it means to you?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking about that, Lisa. So one thing I would mention is that I still am seconded to our legal department for half of the time working on our monitorship. And I have to say it has been one of the most totally fulfilling from a professional standpoint opportunities that I've ever had. I love pretty much every second of being on the monitor liaison team and helping to facilitate our company go through that process. On the compliance side, as you mentioned, I've just started a new role, and it's one that I'm very excited about because a lot of companies, I think, do culture of integrity initiatives on somewhat of an ad hoc basis. And so to have my company say, yep, we're willing to dedicate a function to it and a team to culture of integrity was really just so exciting. And I think in some respects, it's something that we don't typically see. So it's also a great opportunity to do something new, hopefully work on some things that I can share with other companies where we've had success stories. And as always, lessons learned where things have been a disaster, but I hope there's not too many of those situations. And essentially, if anyone's wondering, the culture of integrity aspect does not mean that I own integrity at the company or that I'm responsible for it. The role focuses on the promotion and the measurement of culture of integrity. And we see that mentioned in the Department of Justice guidance. And I haven't really seen a whole lot of a sort of a structured or a methodical program around this particular area. So I'm keen to get into it, but first and foremost, I've got some training work to prepare. So finishing off the specialized trainings for 2020 is what my team has been working on, and I'm starting work with colleagues on preparing for 2021 training as well. So essentially the role boils down to promotion and measurement of our culture of integrity, as well as training and communications.
Well, as part of that, when you were talking before about lessons learned from potential issues or disasters, I think most of us say never waste a good crisis. So, go ahead.
Well, I was thinking more about like my own man-made crisis. So human error, screwing things up from a process standpoint, or having what sounds like a great idea and then it not working and sort of flopping on the culture of integrity side as we try to build that program. I think, I'm hopeful that it's going to be more of that type of crisis than a bribery scandal or something that would be disastrous for sure. So fingers crossed.
I'm pretty confident that it'll be well prepared and well done on that. But
Thank you.
The other thing that I really think is interesting about that, and as you talk about your role, also having this dual role, with, is that you really are getting from the experience with the monitorship, you really are getting some solid skills and learning about that process in a way you can help use that to build going forward. It seems very much like a sort of a creative and innovative way that Fresenius is using you and utilizing these skill sets to build the company. And I think that's really interesting, in a time where, a lot of companies are trying to be as consistent in certain ways as possible. I think it's a really innovative and fantastic experience or, way to do things.
Yeah, I would say, I would guess at least it's not a conventional, and it's certainly not the norm for us. And I feel incredibly privileged to be almost the special person. We try to keep legal and compliance as independent functions. And I think this role does that. From time to time, there is scope for a conflict to potentially come up. And of course, we have to manage that accordingly. But for the most part, a lot of the monitorship, of course, is compliance-related subject matter. So it's awesome to be able to draw on what's happening in the compliance function within the monitorship work. But I've just been so grateful to the company for giving me this opportunity in the first place. And I never thought of it from the perspective that you mentioned that, it's great for consistency for the company. All I've thought of it was, man, I feel so lucky that I got, I get to do what I love on the compliance side. And there's this awesome experience that not everyone gets to have on the legal side that I'm able to work on as well. So I feel incredibly fortunate to be constantly doing work that I love, but of course it's quite high pressure work as well. So there's a lot of work, and that aspect can be tiring. So when it gets you down, when the exhaustion gets to you, I just try to think back of, man, this is a fantastic opportunity, and aren't I so lucky?
Well, they are also lucky to have you. Now let's just turn over, looking back on 2020, it's been a lot is the best way. I mean, I saw something somewhere recently that said, please stop using the word unprecedented, but it was. I know from, personal professional, we've both been really excited about the podcast and the book. But with that in mind, for you, what do you see as sort of the biggest accomplishment from this past year?
Oh, that's a great question. I think for me has been the company accepting the position in the team to come in of introducing a culture of integrity team into our compliance function. I think that's a wonderful accomplishment, and really showing being a trendsetter in some areas, and potentially even starting out best practices. So I feel like that was a wonderful accomplishment, that the company was listening, and that they thought it was worthy of putting into practice.
Okay. What do you see as the biggest challenge that you had in this past year?
So I don't have a simple answer to this question. I had 3 major challenges, which I'll put to you for perhaps adjudication on what was the worst, Lisa. So I've obviously had the FCPA monitorship and the pandemic, as everyone else has had in the background. And I had 3 major challenges, which thankfully did not occur all at the same time. I think many of our listeners already know about the fact that I had to leave the US at quite short notice because my visa was expiring in the middle of the pandemic. And even though I look back now and everything's turned out fine, that was incredibly harrowing. I had no idea whether I was going to, be able to even pack up my apartment and leave. And I remember at the time, Christy Grant Hart, bless her heart, she said, don't be stressed, don't be worried. We can always go and help and pack up your stuff for you. Just hang in there and not to worry. And that was an awful load off to know that there were people still on the ground that would have helped me if I'd needed it. But thankfully it didn't come to that. And throughout the middle of the year, I had quite awful financial news. The apartment that I have in New Zealand, it became retrospectively out of compliance after the earthquake in Christchurch in 2011. New Zealand reviewed its earthquake strength standards, and suddenly my little apartment, which used to be in compliance, now wasn't. And the cost of repairs, I believe, is averaging somewhere around 90% of the value of people's homes to get them strengthened. And we had a similar crisis in New Zealand several years ago, which I also was a victim of, which was called the leaky home or leaky buildings crisis, where many of the properties that were built in New Zealand were made to sort of Mediterranean housing standards. And we just had completely different weather. So we were, very happy thinking our buildings look fantastic. Unfortunately, they weren't weather tight. So the buildings, whenever there was water ingress, they would start rotting from the outside. And that was horrifically expensive to remediate. So anyway, that was a 2020 challenge, but I just mention it because it's something that not many other countries have had to deal with. And so after finding out that shocking news, just a few weeks ago now, I was sitting at home and the fire alarms went off in my building, and I just ignored them for some time. In a big apartment building, someone's just...
That's not very compliant of you.
Well, usually someone's just... because our fire alarms are very sensitive. Like I was cooking bacon one time and I hadn't even burnt it, and my alarm started going off, and I just thought, good grief. So... usually I give it like a minute or two. And to be fair to me, from a compliance standpoint, the lady does say on the intercom, please wait, for notification or confirmation that this really is an emergency. Mm-hmm. And I decided, this time it's not stopping. So I better head out. And when I opened my doors, there was sort of water coming towards me. I couldn't smell any smoke, but water came. I thought, this probably is an emergency. So I threw like 3 towels down behind me as I left, and waited for the fire engines and everything to come. And long story short, it transpired that the apartment across the hall had caught fire. There was no one in it at the time, so it's curious. And what I presume was flooding from the sprinkler system, plus the fireman's hoses, and then just soot encased sort of 80% of the floor area of my apartment. And I do tend to keep a lot of stuff sort of in storage, like in the walk-in closets and stuff. So I was displaced for about 10 days recently, and living out of hotels, and just the cleanup continues. It was horrific. So I put to you, I don't know what was the worst out of that.
Well, I mean, I think that we could put them in a general category of, home related challenges.
I know. I've got to stop. I mean, and it didn't, whether I'm landlord or tenant, I was hit.
Pretty much, yeah.
Didn't matter which role I played. Both of them were problematic. So,
especially in a time where you need to be at home so much during COVID.
Exactly. And so, and I just thought, thank goodness this didn't happen during lockdown. I mean, how would I have been trying to get to hotels and things like that in the middle of a proper lockdown? So I was grateful at least that it didn't happen then, or perhaps when I was in New Zealand still, and, not here to clean it up while stuff sort of rotted and things. But anyway, I think it's been a unique year in that respect. 3 major challenges that caused a lot of stress. And I know that the dawn of 2020 doesn't suddenly make everything in the world right, but I will say I'm looking forward to new beginnings.
Yeah. And I guess with that in mind, a favorite memory of 2020?
Oh my gosh, it has to be the book coming out, for me at least. I mean, you've probably got Rocky to choose from as well. Lisa's sweet wee dog, he's the cutest thing. So for me, it was the book in the absence of a Rocky. Rocky
does have a very dedicated aunt in you, so it kind of all is together.
Yeah, if I can take joy from Rocky's arrival as well. So with my true claim to not really being a Rocky parent would be the release of the book coming out. And I think I've said it before on the show, just having something to work on during the pandemic was some kind of source of normality and a goal that I was really grateful for.
Yeah, I mean, it is a favorite memory of mine as well. I mean, it was such a great experience and journey. So that's it. Now, as I was going to say, you're in the process of developing your 2021 plan, but since I know you, I'm pretty sure you've already finished it. So What I wanted to know from a compliance standpoint, particularly, or ethics standpoint, is, given everything we went through in 2020, have you changed your focus for your priorities, your training, other things? And do you think that it should be changing our focus at all?
I think, yes, it probably should be. One of the things that I'm that's informing the way that I approach my training plan in particular is being under the monitorship and satisfying any of the monitor recommendations in that respect. So in terms of overarching information, I think one of the things that I'm quite conscious of is Zoom fatigue. And, I guess that's being used in two ways: fatigue in the fact that everyone's kind of over it. But secondly, in that, too much video conferencing is literally exhausting for people. So thinking about the forums in which to supply information and not cause compliance fatigue is also something that I'm factoring in. And one of the things that I'm super excited about is incorporating data analytics into our code of conduct training for 2021. So those are a few things that are my priorities at the moment. And I think your compliance plan should be a living document. So as time goes on, when we enter the year of 2021 and circumstances change, new things crop up, I'll be hopefully adjusting and adapting my plan as time goes on.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, not just with the Zoom fatigue, but for me, thinking a lot about investigation is just continuing the Zoom fatigue and the video for that, while at the same time, the issues that I really do believe are going to be raised over the next 6 to 12 months will change, both when there is some type of return to work, who's returning, what's returning. And, my concern is, with all these changes, this is often a time that people can, get a little blurry around the edges, especially with all the business pressure. So there's always that there. But how do you think about that? Make sure you recognize it.
Yeah, and I think there's going to be so much stuff that just crops up and we think, gosh, that makes sense when it does, but you haven't had the opportunity to give it forethought because it's unprecedented. So, one of the things that I've been thinking about is, in different jurisdictions are we going to be able to put rules around having our people be vaccinated? Should we or should we not? Curbing talk about people's health information. If someone does have COVID, how are you controlling that information if it comes into the workplace? All of these new types of queries and concerns that we've never really had to deal with before, or at least I don't think I have in a even analogous context, I think is going to be truly fascinating. And that hits again on the not necessarily some of our core subject matters as compliance officers, but when it starts hitting the ethics and reputational standpoint, we will get drawn in, I believe. So for the compliance officer, a lot to think about, and yet you can only be so prepared in a situation that we've never faced before.
Pretty much sounds like 2020 in a nutshell. So with that, for those of you, again, I said this a minute ago, but she is one of the most prepared people I know for any project. So I decided that for a change of pace here, we're doing this lightning round, which is me asking Mary a few questions that she knows the first one, but not the rest, just to ask about that.
This gives me the heebie-jeebies.
We had to do something different on this. So
yeah, I feel so unsettled.
All right. Well, the first is favorite hotel.
Yeah. So this is, Lisa, I don't know if you know this about me. I am the administrator of like a Facebook group for their like high level loyalty members of their program. Right. So I'm quite vested in hotels and seeing other people's reviews on them and experiences. And one of the, I think, characteristics of liking the adventure in different hotels, liking the adventure and staying in hotels, is that I try to stay at different places at different times. And even when I was displaced for the 10 days recently, I stayed at 9 different hotels to try and make a bit of an adventure out of it. So it's really difficult to think of favorite in terms of a place where, I always will go back to and things like that. But I will mention when I first moved to Boston, I stayed at a place the Element Lexington, which is a long stay sort of basic place. And there was a really lovely shuttle driver, Billy, who would take me to and from the office. And we've stayed in touch. So it was 3 years ago that I first sort of lived at that hotel, and they treated me so well. And I'm really pleased to now call Billy a friend. And whenever I need to be close to the office, which has not been for quite some time now, I will happily go back to the Element Lexington.
Oh, wow. Okay. So what's the thing that you miss most about New Zealand?
I'm sort of torn between the people and the food. The correct answer really should be the people. However,
I was going to exclude family and friends, so I could get a more or less bad.
Well, I was going to. The thing with that though is that technology has meant that I don't miss out completely. Mm. So in terms of things that I really just can't get a hold of or really miss, would be food. And then there's one thing, I guess it's kind of tiny, but in New Zealand with our data privacy law, it's not legal to send people unsolicited sort of advertising and, signing them up to newsletters and things. I so miss that. I feel like every day someone without my consent has signed me up to their darn newsletter that I don't want to read and I don't want clogging up my inbox. I miss that.
I miss it too, and I've never lived in New Zealand.
You've never had it.
I've never had it. So, as you've now lived in the U.S. for a few years, what is one of the strangest things that you've seen since you got here and just realized it might be quintessentially American, or just one of those moments where it just seemed so off to you, but kind of normal to all the other Americans around you?
Oh my goodness, I could probably fill a book with this. And I've seen articles on it where people have, collected up things that are normal in America. So typical things would be a lot of people don't have a jug, like an electric kettle, which is very typical. And for those of us who are, particularly tea drinking countries, you boil a jug of hot water throughout the day kind of thing. So Americans are not thought to have those, although a lot of our listeners will be sitting here right now going, Mary, I do have one of those, as I found out from some of my colleagues who do. But that's one of the things that struck me, sort of heating water in the microwave. Oh, yuck. It's just foreign.
Please, not saying anything on that one. A little bit of both. Forgive me if you're heating your water in a microwave, but please perhaps think about for the holidays getting yourself an electric jug and your life. There's honestly, Lisa, there are just so many. Occasionally there are words and things that people use, like when I say I want to table something, it means I want to put it on the agenda. When Americans say that, it means they want to put it off to the side. So there's been miscommunications in our compliance department early on. I remember I was just going to say when Fernanda Baraldi said somebody talked about it, it's like, I know you're going to hit it out of the park. And in her mind, that was bad. So
yeah, like a foul ball of sorts. Yeah. Yeah, so occasionally, and because I come from a country where English is my first language, you don't naturally necessarily expect that to be the case, but it happens quite a lot, I think, and then people pick up on terms. So like the concierge in my building, she stopped me the other day and she said, you know what, I've started using the word letterbox, and I looked at her dumbly. And because it took me a minute, I hadn't even realized this. Americans, you guys say mailboxes. And so now she, if someone's lost something, she'd be like, oh, did you check the letterbox? And they know what she means. Car park is the same thing. You guys say parking lot, we say car park. Those are the little things. I might have to do a little article on this someday. I'm not sure if there's a compliance bend to it, but there are so many things, and they're not all coming to mind for me right now, which is making me nervous because the lack of preparation and not being able to give you an answer.
But that was awesome because the electric kettle, I think, is fantastic. I mean, that's the whole point. And then the last one, I can't believe of all the things that you do and all the things you do so well, this is what would be the concern. But that's a whole separate conversation.
Thank you for that.
But my last one is just one of your favorite conference memories from one of, we've done many conferences, either on our own or together, but do you have any, particular memories that stick out?
So I think our the birth of our podcast would be one of my favorites, and I maybe because there's an animated video on it now, but I still remember that quite clearly. The coming together of some really brilliant minds. I'm not even necessarily talking about you and me, that would be a bit arrogant, but our friends who helped us along the way and helped us formulate the idea of what it would look like and come up with names and things. It was a fantastic memory, but I can say really that I just miss the whole experience of conferences. I miss learning something new. I miss the takeaways. I miss meeting people that I've only ever corresponded with, seeing old friends, making new friends, being able to make someone else's day by telling them how awesome I thought their session was and making a new friend out of that. I just miss the whole experience. I miss overeating the food. I would never eat that much food during a normal day. Everything about it. What about you, Lisa? What do you miss about the conference experience?
Well, I miss all the things that you said. It's always the way that you get to, I just like all the people in this community so much. Mm-hmm. So I miss getting to see them in person and getting to geek out on the topics for a while. Mm-hmm. And, it really does. It always just feels, like a reunion. I think a lot of us, before you're leaving, you're packing, you're thinking, oh God, I have so much work to do, or this is not a good week. But the minute you get there, it's like, it's a great place. And then I'm not speaking about one versus the other. It's just such a positive, good feeling. One of my favorite specific memories and that I was just thinking about was when we were at National Harbor. I guess that was in 2019 outside Washington, D.C. And after dinner, we had the two of us take our pictures with all of with the different male. I think they were all men in brass bronze statues from the different armed forces. So right in the middle of them were the two of us. And I just kind of remember that moment because it was, you kind of run out into people on the street and people were just genuinely having fun. And it was also, substantive and interesting and good people, but it just was kind of this moment of our community and it was just fun. So when I kind of get a quick flicker of an image in my head, I kind of think about that. With some of our great women, but I all the things you talk about, I miss that part of it. I miss the true sense of our community. So
that running into people in the street, it reminds me a bit like, living in a college town. So everyone, wherever you go, if you've, booked a dinner reservation near to the conference venue, there'll definitely be other people that attending as well. And going out for dinner at the same place and stopping each other and joining their table and so on. That camaraderie and that sort of, the feeling of being surrounded by a community, I think sums it up for me. And I think that's what you really described when you're talking about us getting the photos with the dudes and being out on the street and seeing everyone it feels so good to be surrounded by people who have got the same cause as us, who are really trying to make a difference in the same way that we are and are experiencing the same challenges as us as well. There's something really nice about having people to commiserate with and having people to celebrate with when things have gone right.
Well, and with that, I think, Mary, you just, ending us on the perfect point to sign off for 2020. I thank you for all your support to me personally and professionally. And on behalf of both of us, I'm thanking everybody for encouraging us, supporting us, the book, the podcast, messages for our community. And I know both of us are really looking forward to 2021 and hoping that we can all see each other somewhere soon and not see in air quotes. I hope everyone has a wonderful, take some breaks, some time off, holiday season. I hope you do that too, Mary. And thank you for being here, for being the first GWIC.
Thank you so much, Lisa, and happy holidays to everyone. Please relax, recharge, and reach out to those who bring you joy. It's been our absolute pleasure to spend our time with you, and we thank you so much for your support. Take good care.
Yeah. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Great Women in Compliance. We hope you'll join us in honoring the great women in the compliance field by subscribing to this podcast and leaving a review.